Take a slow breath. Let the weight of the day soften. Here, in this quiet corner of words and wonder, stories unfold like incense in the dark gently, without force. If you find yourself drawn to truths wrapped in human longing, you're in the right place. Subscribe and let the stillness speak. In the heart of a city that pulsed with restless energy, where street lights cast long shadows over rain-slicked pavement, Sarah stood by her apartment window, her breath fogging the glass. At 34, she had built a life with David, her husband of 8 years, a life of shared routines, late-night takeout, and a marketing career that paid the bills but drained her spirit. Tonight, though, the familiar comfort of their home felt like a cage. David slept soundly in their bedroom, unaware of the thoughts spiraling through Sarah's mind. Their marriage, once a tapestry of passion and promises, had frayed into something mechanical. Their intimacy, when it happened, was a chase for fleeting pleasure, a climax that left Sarah feeling more alone than ever. She remembered the early years vividly, stolen kisses in crowded bars, weekends lost in each other's arms, the way David's touch could make the world disappear. But now their nights together were perfunctory, a checklist of motions that failed to bridge the growing distance between them. Sarah wondered if David noticed the shift, or if he too was pretending everything was fine. She hadn't dared ask. Instead, she carried the weight of her unspoken desires, her heart caught between loyalty and a yearning she couldn't name. Across the city, in a dimly lit bar with velvet curtains and the low hum of jazz, Sarah's best friend, Lila, sipped her second gin and tonic. At 32, Lila was the opposite of Sarah, unmarried, fiercely independent, and unapologetic about her choices. Yet tonight, her confidence wavered. Her phone buzzed with a message from Mark, a coworker whose charm had crept into her life over months of subtle flirtations. It started with lingering glances during team meetings, then late-night emails that strayed from work to something more personal. Now, Mark's text carried a heat that made Lila's pulse race. He was engaged, set to marry in 6 months, but the way he looked at her, like she was the only person in the room, felt like a drug she couldn't quit. Tonight he'd asked her to meet him here, and though she knew she should walk away, the thrill of his attention held her in place. Back at the apartment, Sarah poured herself a glass of Merlot and curled up on the couch, her phone resting untouched on the coffee table. She thought about texting Lila, her confidante, through every heartbreak and triumph, but something stopped her. Lila's life seemed so untethered, so full of possibility, while Sarah felt anchored to a marriage that no longer sparked joy. Her mind drifted to Ethan, a colleague who'd started lingering at her desk lately. His easy smile and quiet confidence had stirred something in her, a flicker of excitement she hadn't felt in years. Last week, when he'd brushed her hand while passing her a coffee, the touch had lingered in her mind far longer than it should have. Was it betrayal to feel this way? Or was it simply human? Meanwhile, David wasn't as asleep as Sarah thought. In the darkness of their bedroom, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He sensed the distance growing between them, the way Sarah's laughter had become rare, her touch hesitant. He loved her, but love alone wasn't enough anymore. At work, he'd started confiding in Claire, a new hire whose warmth and curiosity made him feel seen in a way he hadn't in years. Their conversations were innocent lunchtime chats about books and travel, but David couldn't ignore the spark, the way Claire's presence made him question the life he'd built. In this restless city, their lives intertwined like threads in a fragile web. Sarah, torn between duty and desire. Lila, chasing a dangerous thrill with a man she could never have. David, seeking solace in a connection that felt both safe and reckless. And Ethan and Claire, unaware of the roles they played in this delicate dance of longing. Each of them sought something: connection, passion, meaning, but the harder they chased, the more it slipped away, like chasing the illusion of a perfect moment that could never last. The city's pulse seemed to quicken as the night deepened, its rhythm echoing the restless hearts within it. Sarah sat on her couch, the wine glass now empty, her thoughts drifting like smoke. She wondered if she was chasing a ghost, some version of love that only existed in memory. The silence of the apartment felt heavy, broken only by the faint hum of traffic below. She glanced at her phone, tempted to reach out to Ethan, to say something reckless, but instead she typed a message to Lila. "Can we talk? I'm losing myself." She hit send, then waited, her heart a knot of hope and fear. Miles away, Lila sat alone at the bar, her drink sweating onto the coaster. Mark hadn't shown up yet, and doubt began to creep in. Was she foolish to think this could be anything more than a fleeting thrill? Her phone lit up with Sarah's message, and for a moment, guilt tugged at her. Sarah was her anchor, the one who knew her through every reckless choice, yet Lila hadn't told her about Mark. She typed a quick reply, "I'm here, always. Call me," but her fingers hesitated over the send button. The bar door swung open, and there was Mark, his eyes finding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. She slipped her phone back into her purse, unanswered. Mark slid onto the stool beside her, his smile both apologetic and disarming. He was 35, with a quiet confidence that made Lila feel alive in a way she hadn't in months. They talked, their words weaving through safe topics: work, the city, music, but the air between them crackled with unspoken desire. When his hand brushed hers, it wasn't an accident. Lila knew she should pull away, but the warmth of his touch was a tether to something she craved. She wondered what it would be like to let go, to fall into the moment without thinking of the consequences. But the thought of his fiancée, a woman she'd never met, lingered like a shadow. Back at the apartment, David stirred in bed, unable to sleep. He'd heard Sarah leave the bedroom, the soft creak of the floorboards betraying her restlessness. He wanted to go to her, to ask what was wrong, but fear held him back. What if she confirmed what he already suspected, that their love was slipping away? Instead, he thought of Claire, her easy laugh, the way she listened without judgment. At work, their conversations had become a refuge, a place where he could be more than a husband failing to keep his wife happy. He knew it was dangerous, this pull toward someone new, but it felt like a lifeline. Sarah's phone buzzed with a notification, but it wasn't Lila. It was an email from Ethan, sent after hours, the subject line simply, "Thinking of you." Her heart skipped. She opened it, her eyes scanning the words. "I know this is out of the blue, but I can't stop thinking about our talk today. You seem like you're carrying something heavy. I'm here if you need me." The message was kind, restrained, but it stirred a warmth in her that felt both thrilling and wrong. She closed her phone, her mind a tangle of guilt and longing. She loved David, didn't she? But love wasn't supposed to feel like this, like chasing a high that always left you empty. In that moment, across the city, each of them stood at a crossroads. Sarah, torn between the safety of her marriage and the pull of something new. Lila teetering on the edge of a choice that could unravel her carefully guarded independence. David wrestling with his own quiet betrayal. And Mark playing with fire, drawn to Lila despite the ring he'd promised to another. Their desires, like moths to a flame, danced dangerously close to destruction, each seeking an ecstasy that felt just out of reach, a momentary illusion that promised everything but delivered so little. The night stretched on, wrapping the city in a haze of quiet longing. Sarah lay awake on the couch, Ethan's email still glowing in her mind. She hadn't replied, but the urge to do so was a pulse beneath her skin. She imagined what it would be like to confide in him, to let her guard down and feel seen, not as David's wife, not as a co-worker, but as herself. Yet the thought of crossing that line filled her with dread. She'd seen what affairs did to people friends whose marriages crumbled, trust shattered like glass. Still, the emptiness in her marriage made Ethan's kindness feel like water in a desert. In the bar, Lila and Mark had moved to a corner booth, their conversation growing softer, more intimate. The jazz melted into the background, and the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them. Mark spoke of his life, his demanding job, his upcoming wedding, the pressure to be the man everyone expected. Lila listened, her heart twisting. She saw the cracks in his polished exterior, the same restlessness she felt in herself. When he leaned closer, his voice low, asking if she wanted to leave together, she hesitated. The part of her that craved control screamed to walk away, but the part that yearned for connection whispered to stay. She excused herself to the restroom, needing a moment to breathe. Splashing water on her face, Lila stared into the mirror. Her reflection looked like a stranger eyes bright with excitement, but shadowed with doubt. She thought of Sarah, her message still unanswered. Lila knew Sarah was struggling, yet here she was, chasing her own reckless escape. Was this who she wanted to be? Someone who hurt others for a fleeting thrill? She pulled out her phone and finally sent her reply to Sarah. I'm here. Call me tomorrow? I'm sorry. I've been distant. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. David, meanwhile, had slipped out of bed and stood in the hallway, watching Sarah's silhouette against the living room window. He wanted to cross the distance, to hold her and ask what had changed, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he thought of Claire's latest text, sent earlier that day. Loved our chat today. You always make me laugh. It was innocent, but it stirred a warmth he hadn't felt with Sarah in months. He hated himself for it. He loved Sarah, but love wasn't supposed to feel like a battlefield, each of them retreating to their own corners. He wondered if she was slipping away, or if he was the one letting go. The city's lights flickered outside, indifferent to the choices unfolding within its walls. Each of them, Sarah, Lila, David, Mark, was chasing a moment of transcendence, a peak that promised to fill the void within. But the harder they reached, the clearer it became. The ecstasy they sought was an illusion, a mirage that dissolved upon arrival. In their pursuit of pleasure, they'd lost sight of something deeper: connection, presence, truth. This is where the wisdom of the ancients begins to whisper. In Vajrayana Buddhism, there's a teaching that desire, when misunderstood, binds us to suffering. The orgasm, the climax, the fleeting high, it's not the enemy, but it's not the answer either. It's a doorway, a glimpse of the boundless, but only if we learn to see beyond the surface. Sarah's longing for Ethan, Lila's pull toward Mark, David's comfort in Claire, these weren't just betrayals of others, but of themselves. They were chasing shadows, mistaking the spark for the flame. The Buddha taught that suffering arises from attachment, not to pleasure itself, but to the belief that pleasure will save us. Sarah believed Ethan's attention would heal her loneliness. Lila thought Mark's desire would affirm her worth. David hoped Claire's warmth would ease his doubts. But these were fleeting fixes, like chasing a dream that fades upon waking. True liberation, the teachings say, comes from turning inward, from seeing desire not as a master to obey, but as a teacher to learn from. As dawn crept over the city, painting the skyline in hues of gold and gray, Sarah woke on the couch, her neck stiff, her wine glass still cradled in her hand. The silence of the early morning felt like a pause, a moment to breathe before the world demanded her attention again. She checked her phone and saw Lila's reply, a small tether to the friend she'd been missing. But Ethan's email lingered in her mind, its words a quiet temptation. She wanted to respond, to pour out her confusion, but something stopped her, a flicker of clarity perhaps, or the weight of her wedding ring against her finger. Lila, meanwhile, had left the bar alone. Mark had pressed her to stay, his hand lingering on her arm, but she'd pulled away, citing an early morning. The truth was, she'd seen her own reflection in his eyes, hungry, reckless, lost. She walked home through the quiet streets, the city's pulse slowing as the night faded. Lila wasn't one for regret, but tonight she felt the sting of it. She thought of Sarah, of their late-night talks about dreams and fears, and vowed to call her later. For now she needed to sit with herself, to untangle the knot of desire that had nearly pulled her under. David was already up, brewing coffee in the kitchen when Sarah stirred. He watched her from the doorway, her face soft in the morning light, and felt a pang of love mixed with fear. He wanted to tell her about Claire, not because anything had happened, but because the secret was eating at him. But how do you confess a feeling? How do you admit you're drawn to someone else when you still love the person in front of you? He poured a second cup of coffee and set it beside her, a small gesture that felt like both an apology and a plea. The city began to wake, its hum rising like a tide. Sarah, David, Lila, Mark, they were all caught in the same human struggle, seeking something to fill the ache within. But the Buddhist teachings, ancient and steady, offer a different path. Vajrayana speaks of transforming desire, not by suppressing it, but by understanding its nature. Desire is energy, raw and potent, but when we cling to it, we create suffering. The orgasm, the peak of pleasure, is a fleeting glimpse of freedom, but it's not the destination. It's a reminder of the vastness within us, a spark that points to something greater. The Buddha taught that liberation comes from letting go not of desire itself, but of the stories we tell ourselves about it. Sarah's story was that Ethan could save her from her loneliness. David's was that Claire could make him feel whole again. Lila believed Mark's attention would prove her worth. But these stories were illusions, chains that kept them tethered to suffering. To break free, they needed to see clearly, to witness their desires without being consumed by them. Here, the wisdom of Vajrayana offers a bridge. It teaches us to meet desire with mindfulness, to feel its heat without being burned. Imagine Sarah pausing before replying to Ethan, sitting with the longing in her chest, noticing its rise and fall like a wave. Imagine David speaking honestly to Sarah, not out of guilt, but from a place of vulnerability. Imagine Lila choosing herself over the thrill of Mark's gaze. These acts of awareness, small but profound, are the first steps toward freedom. And so, let's consider 3 ways to navigate the illusions of desire, drawn from the heart of Buddhist practice. First, cultivate mindfulness. Sit with your feelings, whether longing, anger, or fear, without rushing to act. Notice their texture, their weight, their impermanence. Like clouds passing through a vast sky, they arise and dissolve if you let them. Second, practice honest communication. Speak your truth, not to wound, but to connect. Share your struggles with those you love, not to burden them, but to build a bridge. Third, embrace impermanence. Nothing lasts, not pleasure, not pain, not even the stories we tell ourselves. By accepting this, we loosen the grip of attachment and find peace in the present moment. The morning light softened the city's edges, casting a gentle glow over its restless heart. Sarah sipped the coffee David had left for her, its warmth a quiet comfort. She looked at him across the kitchen, his eyes tired but kind, and felt a stirring of hope. They hadn't spoken much lately, but this small act of coffee, shared silence, felt like a beginning. She decided not to reply to Ethan's email. Instead, she turned to David and said, "Can we talk tonight?" "Really talk?" He nodded, a flicker of relief crossing his face. It wasn't a solution, but it was a step, a choice to face the truth rather than run from it. Lila, back in her apartment, sat cross-legged on her floor, a candle flickering nearby. She'd blocked Mark's number, not out of anger, but out of clarity. She'd spent too long chasing moments that left her empty, mistaking intensity for meaning. When she called Sarah later that day, they talked for hours, their laughter and tears weaving a bond stronger than any fleeting thrill. Lila promised herself to be present, to choose connections that nourished rather than consumed her. David, too, made a choice. At work, he kept his distance from Claire, not because he didn't care, but because he wanted to honor what he still had with Sarah. That evening, he and Sarah sat on their couch, no phones, no distractions. They spoke of their fears, their doubts, their hopes. It wasn't easy. Words stumbled, silences stretched, but it was honest. They didn't solve everything, but they began to rebuild, brick by fragile brick, a foundation rooted in truth. Mark, alone in his apartment, felt the weight of Lila's absence. Her decision to walk away forced him to confront his own choices. He loved his fiancée, but he'd been running from the work of building a life together. He vowed to be more present, to face the hard questions rather than seek escape in fleeting desires. The city hummed on, its rhythm unchanged, but for Sarah, David, Lila, and Mark, something had shifted. They'd each touched the edge of their longing, felt its pull, and chosen to step back, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. Vajrayana teaches that desire is not the enemy. It's a teacher, pointing us toward the truth of our own hearts. The orgasm, the climax, the moment of ecstasy, it's a glimpse of the infinite, but only if we see it for what it is, a fleeting wave in the vast ocean of existence. To walk this path, the teachings offer practical tools beyond the 3 ways we've explored. Let's add 3 more techniques to guide us through the illusions of desire. Fourth, practice self-compassion. When you falter, when you chase the wrong thing, meet yourself with kindness, not judgment. Fifth, cultivate gratitude. Notice the small moments, the warmth of a shared coffee, the laughter of a friend that anchor you to the present. Sixth, seek stillness. Whether through meditation or a quiet walk, create space to listen to your own heart, to hear the whispers beneath the noise. These 6 techniques, mindfulness, honest communication, embracing impermanence, self-compassion, gratitude, and stillness, are not quick fixes. They're practices like tending a garden, requiring patience and care. Sarah and David began to tend theirs, sitting together in the quiet, learning to see each other anew. Lila found her strength in choosing herself, in building a life that didn't depend on another's gaze. Mark turned toward his own truth, ready to face the work of love. The city's lights dimmed as night fell once more, but within its walls, a different kind of light flickered, one born of awareness, of courage, of letting go. Desire, the Buddha reminds us, is not to be feared, but to be understood. It's a fire that can burn or illuminate, depending on how we hold it. And in that understanding, we find not just pleasure, but peace. If something in this story stayed with you, don't keep it quiet. Share it. Someone else may be waiting for just this kind of reminder. Subscribe for more stories where heartache meets healing and the unseen becomes known. Remember, even the darkest entanglements can lead us back to light.